Anyone familiar with the Toy Story movies? The first one, yeah, the mom of a 4-year-old back there is like, oh yes, all too familiar. Back here, the first one came out actually in 1999. So some of our young teens here would have been little tykes at that time. All about Woody and Buzz Lightyear. The Toy Story first movie came out in 1999. There have been a couple of sequels since then. The premise of the Toy Story movie, which is really quite a clever one, is that our toys have feelings and personalities and voices. The opening scene of the first Toy Story movie is the day that all the toys dread. One might ask, what day would be the day that all toys dread? The birthday of the child who holds you as a toy. Because on your birthday you get more toys. So the old toys just might get sent to Goodwill, or might get tossed aside, or might get put under the bed after a birthday party. So the opening scene is all of the toys getting ready for the birthday party. They've actually got the army figures down in the trenches, ready to defend themselves against the new toys on the birthday. Well, the favorite toys of Andy, the boy in the movie, his favorite toy and the main character of the movie is Woody. Now, Woody is as you can imagine, wooden figure that's dressed like a cowboy. Cowboy hat, cowboy boots, the whole 9 yards. That's Woody. There's also Bo Peep, and there's Mr. Potato Head, all of them, again, with voices and characteristics and personalities, all of them. Now, for Andy's birthday, that first scene in the first movie, he gets what is to become what becomes the point of climax for the first movie around the entry of Buzz Lightyear. Perhaps you've seen Buzz over time. Buzz is the space guy who's digital and has lights and all of that. So of course Bo Peep and Mr. Potato Head and Woody don't think they have much to compare with Buzz Lightyear, the new toy. Well, in that first movie, it all revolves around what happens with Woody and Buzz and this new friendship that grows among the toys. Well, in the second Toy Story movie, Andy, the boy, goes away to cowboy camp. And while he's gone, Woody, his favorite toy, gets kidnapped. He gets kidnapped by a toy collector. And he gets thrown into a room that's dark, and he gets locked in. Woody, of course, is discouraged, in despair. Will someone come looking for him? Will he be found? Maybe he'll be forgotten. Right about that time, a girl appears. Imagine that. A toy girl appears, also dressed in Western wear. And she sees him and says, "Woody!" And he responds, "How do you know my name?" And she turns on the lights and says, "Don't you know who you are?" And he looks around this room that he's been locked in with the lights off. And all he sees is Woody memorabilia. The whole room is filled with Woody dolls, posters, figurines. He's confused. And then she turns on the television and shows him old movies, because he had been a famous movie star. And he's mesmerized and overjoyed when he sees himself on the screen. Woody hadn't even known who he was. And so it is with God. God knows us before we know who God is. And often God knows us before we even know to want to know who God is. And we find ourselves at a moment of baptism. Jesus arriving at the river Jordan, wondering, who am I? Pretty sure he had spent years, we are assuming, we don't know much about his young life. He had spent years being told that he was special, yet being raised in a fairly ordinary way. He comes to the river, who am I? And we can only imagine that all of the other crowds of people who had come to gather at the River Jordan were also coming with that question. Who are we? And God responded to Jesus by saying, you are mine, my son, the beloved. Jesus would find out not only who he was, but whose he was, who he belonged to. God. We often, each year, we celebrate the baptism story early in the year, just after Christmas, the Sunday after we celebrate the Epiphany, the Three Kings, which means we haven't given Jesus very long to grow up, have we? I mean, just last week he was a baby in the manger being visited by the Three Kings. And now, here he is. But we do so in part because, not only because we have little information about Jesus in those early years, but because every miracle story, parable, every teaching of Jesus that we will come to later in Scripture through the Gospels are all grounded in today's story, are all grounded in his baptism. As we begin what will be many weeks of talking about Jesus' earthly ministry, all the things that he shared with the people, with his disciples and others, all of it is grounded in his baptism. And so it is with us. Because our stories, too, are rooted in our baptisms. As United Methodists, we practice what is called infant baptism. Now, how many here today were baptized as infants? Meaning, you don't really remember it. Yeah? How many others were baptized when, either as a young person or as an adult? So you remember your baptism. Okay? In the United Methodist Church, we practice infant baptism. We certainly also baptize adults who have not yet been baptized. Our belief about baptism is that it has a lot more to do with God than it does with a particular decision on our behalf. We believe baptism is about who God is and what God has done for us. And so parents might come to baptize their child wanting to acknowledge what God has already been about, offering grace to each child, each person, unconditionally. Now, for those denominations who wait and have people wait until they are young adults, perhaps teenagers, to be baptized, there is much value in the process that persons in those churches go through to prepare themselves for their baptism.